Access granted.
Subject: Interview with Cory Cantelupe. Body: on 8/16/2023, Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80, was tasked with the mission of interviewing the awesome Cory Cantelupe, famous for his sculpting work on the Hasbro G.I. Classified series and now Skeletron and Boss Fight Studio. Here's what we could show you from that G14 classified recording.
Access granted.
Hello and welcome to the Full Force Redacted, brought to you by GeneralsJoesReborn.com with me, Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. On the show today, we have a sculptor who has worked on so many awesome brands over the years, including Power Rangers, the G.I. Joe Classified series. He's currently working on a number of different projects with numerous companies, including Skeletron and Boss Fight Studio. Cory Cantelupe, thank you so much for spending the time to do this with me. How are you doing, my good man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Excited to be on the podcast. We've known each other for a while, so I'm glad I can, officially be part of the
show.
Full Force.
Yeah.
Show.
Well, now you're going to be a guest host, and we're going to get you on all the time now. You've let yourself in for a tough time there. But also, see, guys, I told you he was my friend. I told you I knew him. I've just been saying this whole time. Yeah, Cory, I know Cory, and everyone's like, whatever, mate. It's one of those situations. Anyway, mate, great to have you on. I've been saying your surname the incorrect way forever, and I feel terrible for it.
Totally fine.
Go ahead and confirm your proper name, please, or how to say it.
Yes, my name is Cory Cantelupe. But if you put a Cantelupe on there, I won't complain.
I've been doing that for ages. So I feel terrible. And I blooming knew him, and I got it wrong, guys. What the hell's wrong with me? Anyway, look, an amazing scene behind you as well, by the way. That's an incredible layout.
Thank you. This is my Mythic Legions collection. The Legions figures have had me hooked for a long time.
I can see.
And, I'm a bit obsessed. But also, this is we recently moved to a new house, and so this is my new office setup, and so I'm still getting the rest of my collection set up as well. But I wanted these to have a place of prominence for me.
They look
a constant inspiration.
Look incredible behind you there. Yeah, it's a line I've never really got into, but it's one from like one I admire from a distance and just be like, that's some pretty awesome stuff. So yeah, lovely stuff.
It's a slippery slope, because I didn't get in on the first two Kickstarters, and then I picked up one actually, Arethyr, the fire-headed demon here.
Nice.
Was the one that was like, all right, well, I got to get that one, and now it's this. So
that was just a week ago, guys, and now look at it. That's amazing. Well, welcome to the show, mate. It's been too long. We've had you on once, actually. We had you on a long time ago.
Yes. Once with me and Lenny.
Yeah, that was a great show. Really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
So we can get into some details about that. Obviously, there's the things we shouldn't talk about, which we'll probably talk about. You know what I'm talking about. The sore subjects that we'll probably have to cover, but you know what I mean. We'll get through it. I'll be gentle. Fine. I'll be gentle. I'm not going to... Let's start though, because for anyone that doesn't know who you are, let's start with a little bit of background. Like, how did you get? I mean, you're a sculptor by trade, aren't you? How did you get into that, and like, how has that kind of developed over the years?
Sure.
That's a deep question, isn't
it? The long and short of it is in college, I went to Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio. And I was planning on going into comic book illustration. I've been a big fan of comic books, and cartoons, video games, and of course action figures for all my life.
What sort of comics were like back then? What were the sort of comics you were into back then that got you into wanting to do that?
I had actually inherited a collection of nearly 1,000 Marvel comics from my uncle that was like really in the sweet spot of like a 1983 to like 86.
Nice.
And so he gave those to me when he, aged out of it, so that was my introduction to Marvel comics, and just comic reading. And then, the 90s X-Men, Spider-Man, those were very near and dear to me. Then that, got me continue reading comics. Ultimate Spider-Man was one of the, my ultimate favorites. Ultimate
Ultimate
and
favorite. Yeah.
yep.
Amazing.
And
See what I did there?
yeah, thank you. I don't know why I do this with you, but that's fine.
There's gonna be a lot of these puns. I'm sorry, every
I love
single
it.
time.
Good. Yeah. So in any case, I was going to school for comic book illustration, but I had started collecting action figures, particularly the Marvel Legends line, when I was in high school. And so I already had a decent toy collection, through college.
Yeah.
And then my junior year, I went to Star Wars Celebration.
Ooh.
I think it was 4, I think.
Yeah.
And I went there with a couple of my friends, and they had David Venemeyer was there, and he was doing a little sculpting presentation just in the Hasbro booth.
Nice.
And that was my first moment of like, wait a second, making toys can be the job. You don't have to do, comics or cartoons, the things around it. Like, that could be it, which is ridiculous in retrospect to be like, obviously someone is making these things.
I'm the same. I didn't. I didn't even think these things existed until later years. Absolutely.
Right. And so I met Dave. And we started chatting. He introduced me to what the wax sculpting was and whatnot. And I told him like I'm a student at Columbus College of Art and Design, and right then he was like, "Oh yeah, we recently hired someone that went to CCAD, and his name was Chris Dern." And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know who that was, but, there was a little connection. So after the convention, I went back to school, and I was talking to one of my sculpture professors, and, I was like, hey, Hasbro sculpts in this wax. I want to be able to get some wax to start playing with. And, it was probably 2 months later, David Venemeyer, Chris Dern, and one of the other Hasbro sculptors was at the school. And they put on a sculpting, a primarily sculpting, but also toy design, seminar, and essentially a competition. And so Chris Dern, who was the director of sculpting at the time, he was the alumni at CCAD, and so he wanted to set this up with his alma mater. And so they came, they gave a little presentation. This is how you sculpt and wax. This is how you do articulation, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, we're going to come back in 3 months, and you need to have a character designed, so you need 2D design drawings, and you need to have a finished wax sculpt, and you need to have at least 5 points of articulation. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to dump my whole heart into this.
Yeah.
And I was collecting Marvel Legends at the time. So by the end, I did, a figure who had alternate heads. It was a X-Men inspired character, and so he had a masked head and an unmasked head. And I gave him these superpowers. It's fine, whatever. But then I gave him 27 points of articulation.
Nice.
Because that's, I have loved articulation from the beginning. So they were impressed enough with that. I don't have the actual sculpt anymore, but I still have images of it. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, clearly they saw something because it's bad. But realistically, that was my first adventure into sculpting amazing. At all.
You'd never really made anything with your hands like that before, kind of
No. I've done like some construction-y stuff, and I obviously play with action figures. I've made little, cardboard play sets for myself, when I was younger and such. But no, I didn't really get into sculpting until that. But it really, it clicked for me that it was like, this makes sense. It came much more naturally to me than the 2D side.
Right.
And so they were impressed with it enough that I got an internship.
That's amazing.
Yep. And then I went back to school, and they did the competition seminar again. I participated again. And that second one, I really wanted to raise the bar of what I was doing. I ended up doing a character with a large robot arm. And so he had like a claw hand, and I did all articulated fingers.
Nice.
I put like gear, functional gears in the arm and such. So that one, I introduced a lot of fabrication with the sculpting. And I'm certainly more proud of that one than my first one. But
I'm just wondering if there'll be any possibility you'll ever want to show that off, and we'll flash it up on screen of those two
Sure. Yeah, I got the images. I can send them to you, and you can
Nice,
show them. So,
nice.
here is, figure one and figure two.
There is.
Yeah.
That is
Um,
quite incredible, though. Considering it
yeah.
was your first real foray into it, to be kind of kicking butt
Yeah.
so early on, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Like I say, it's very amateur. The first one that I did for sure, but they could see the potential of it. Also they could see my passion for it, and
Yeah,
everything. So they took me under their wing. Excuse me. Taught me, then how to sculpt and really how to get into it. And so with my second figure, I was graduating that year, so I went and did a 1 year temp position in the sculpture department at Hasbro. And then that was really off to the races with my career. After that temp position, I did freelance. And so I did that for about 5 years. As a freelancer, though, I only worked with Hasbro. Well, I guess we'll include this part too. My wife, girlfriend at the time, we met in college, and she also participated in the sculpture competition. And her sculpts were really quite good, but for her, it made more sense to be on the design side. The 2D side came much more naturally to her, the same
right.
way the 3D came more naturally to me. And so when she showed her competition piece, the Hasbro sculptors were like, wow, this is really good, but your drawings and your designs are, incredible.
Yeah,
And she's amazingly talented.
yeah.
And
I can
so,
vouch for that. Emily's amazing.
yeah, yes. For those that may not know, my wife still works at Hasbro, so she got into the internship and the temp position the same way that I did, but she was on design, and she was on girls' toys at the time, and I was on sculpture, which I
Covers
touched a bit of
everything. Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And so then when I went freelance, she was picked up full time, with the girls' department, working on Littlest Pet Shop at the time.
Awesome.
Yep. I did freelance for a couple of years. And then I came in to do another temp position. And this one was actually on the Creo department. Which is a little different. But I was able to show that, my sculpting skills and my ability to think three-dimensionally and engineer things, I proved that out with brick building as well. And then that was where I got hired full time. And then eventually Creo was no longer pursued by
Yeah,
the company.
yeah,
And so then I got transferred back over to the sculpture department, which is really the heart of what I do,
yeah.
and where my dream lies. And so, I was with the sculpture department after that. And around that time as well, Emily was moved over to the Action Brands, where she's now the designer on Star Wars: The Vintage Collection, and crushing it.
Yeah. Ghost looks amazing, doesn't it? Oh my goodness.
Yes. Oh my God. I was able to see some of the early models of it while I was there, and I mean, it is beautiful and huge. And the moment you can see it in person, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's really quite shocking how incredible it is.
Yeah,
So
that's
back
amazing.
to Ghost.
Yeah, yeah, do it now. There you go. Link in the description.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell at what point did it change from being that kind of like hands-on, very, wax sculpting kind of thing? What point did it change and go into that digital arena? Because that's something that obviously you had to relearn, I guess, or do from
Yes.
scratch.
Yeah, that was an interesting time there. I was freelance at the time, so working from home, doing freelance work, contract work. I went, a couple of months without a job,
Yeah.
And so I called up, some of the guys at Hasbro, and I'm like, hey man, I'm not getting any work. Like, what's up? And they're like, well, pretty much everything we're doing now is digital. And I was like, oh, okay.
Brilliant.
And it was one of the funny things while I was at Hasbro as a temp, in that first year, digital was starting to kind of happen and catch on.
Yeah.
And one of the sculpting managers at Hasbro, who's no longer with the company, but incredibly talented, and he was great to work with. He said, digital sculpting is going to be the next big thing, but it's never going to be more than like 10 to 15% of the industry.
Right.
And it was, about 3 years later, it was 100%.
Yeah.
And like nothing is traditional anymore, at least not at Hasbro. And,
Yeah.
the majority of the industry has all gone digital as well. There's very few, hand wax and clay sculpture in the toy industry anymore, and which makes sense. I mean, the advantages of digital are insane.
Yeah.
And I do miss being able to hand sculpt things at time, but
do you get the
I
time
never
to do that anymore, like just for fun, or is it really not really, you can't fit it in anymore?
Well, generally no. Don't really have much time.
Yeah,
But when I do get some time to do some personal work, sorry, my cat's walking across the keyboard.
that's
Sorry.
fine. That's fine.
Yep. When I do get time, I still only want to do it digital because the advantages there, being able to duplicate things, mirroring, and the big one is just being able to undo.
Yeah.
I do a lot of exploratory sculpting while I go, meaning like, does this, cheekbones need to be a little bit more, exaggerated or sunken in or whatever. Yeah. I can quickly play with that digitally, and then if it's like, nope, that didn't work, I can just undo. Whilst traditionally it's, okay, I'll add a little bit of wax.
Take
yeah,
it
nope,
away.
no, I gotta take it away,
Yeah.
and it's more time consuming to do it that way.
Undo.
Yeah.
So much quicker, right? Yeah, like.
Oh my God, it's incredible.
Based on,
yeah.
okay, so right, okay, so you were talking about when you kind of first got into it in an official capacity as well. Do you remember the first figure you worked on, like the first official figure you worked on?
Yes. So the first figure I worked on as an intern was there was a 4-inch Iceman figure from Marvel that was, I think it was part of the
is it Infinite or Ultimate? I can't remember what the line was. The 4-inch.
It was before the Marvel Universe line.
That's it,
this was actually part of the X-Men Wolverine Origins line.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but so the Iceman was a great figure, and I didn't get to work on that one at all, but he came with this little ice surfboard. And so that was the first project that I worked on, was making this little surfboard and putting like ice crystals coming off the front of it. If I can find a picture, I'll send it to you.
Thank you. I was going to say I'll be able to dig one of those out. Do you have that? Do you have like an example of that? Like, did you get one so that you had?
I mean, yes, I certainly do somewhere.
This is not a test for you to pick it out and show us, but I'm interested because I know a lot of like my friends in the industry, like the Boss Fight studio guys. Obviously you do, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but a lot of those guys, they'll have stuff in their offices that just it's just like stuff they've worked on in the past, and it's really cool to see like a little history of what they've done. And I was wondering if you do the same thing. Do you try and get hold of all of the things that you work on?
For the most part I do, but also to this point, almost everything I work on, I also collect.
Exactly.
So I'm getting them anyway, because it's like, oh, well, I did make this, but I also need it for my collection. And so I don't have a section of like, these are the projects I did. That Iceman is in with my 4-inch Marvel figures in a bin somewhere. I can't have everything displayed at once, unfortunately.
Of course.
And so, that is part of that collection. I've done some other odds and ends Star Wars figures throughout the years. Those are in with the Star Wars collections. Even if they're not relevant, I'll still have them.
Sure.
Meaning I did work on a 5 POA Luke at one point. I'm very happy with that figure. I think it turned out great, but it's not the figure I'm going to have out as like my Luke, because it's 5 POA. There's much better versions of that now, and that type of thing. But I have one somewhere.
Yeah. Right, your mission next time is to get all of the figures you've ever worked on and have them behind you on that.
Okay.
That'll be like a quick 5-minute job. It'd be easy.
No problem.
Probably wouldn't fit.
Actually, can you hold on? I'll just
go do it now. We've got a few minutes. In fact, would they all fit behind you? Probably not. You've probably done that many now, wouldn't you say that you'd probably...
Well, once you include the full lines that I've done, Classified Series and Power Rangers Lightning Collection, that's going to be where the bulk of the work is. Because I was managing those full lines. Whilst coming up in the industry, it was much more of like, okay, I'm going to sculpt a Luke figure and a Iceman thing, or I'll work on some accessories for this or that, but then once it starts blooming out into collections,
Yeah.
It's a little different.
No, that's cool, man. That's amazing. Now, G.I. Joe, obviously we're part of, this is the Full Force. This is a G.I. Joe, podcast and everything. What was G.I. Joe to you? Was it part of your childhood? I mean, what kind of era are we talking about? Take us through your connection with that brand, please.
Yeah. So I'm a little younger than a lot of the G.I. Joe community. So
Cory's only 12 years old. He's 12 years old.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I'm 36, so I was born in 1986. And so by the time I was getting to the toy age, even the later iterations of G.I. Joe were kind of teetering off.
Yeah.
But I had a friend that was a little older that he grew out of it faster. And so, he gave me his entire collection.
Wow.
It wasn't huge, but, there was quite a few vehicles, and some figures, a bunch of figures really. And I did not see the cartoon and I didn't read the comics. Yeah. I just had the toys. And so I didn't know who any of them were. And I made up my own stories with them,
Yeah, that's amazing.
But I had the G.I. Joe headquarters. I understood G.I. Joe. I understood Cobra, and that type of thing. And it wasn't until college, actually, I think, that I went back and, watched all of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero.
Yeah.
And then, obviously it was very out of date at the time, but it absolutely resonated with me,
right.
And I still feel like that cartoon holds up, for the age.
Oh, God, I love it. Yeah, it's always on in the background for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's certainly silly, 80s and 90s things in it, but
perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. What are you talking about?
Exactly. And so really my true introduction to G.I. Joe was the 25th anniversary line.
Nice.
And so that line, I got all of them, from the jump of the 25th, I was getting into it, and army building and whatnot. And I mean, my collection of 4-inch, modern era G.I. Joes is huge, several bins deep. So that was really what started me into it. And then, graduating and getting to work on it, I worked on several of the Pursuit of Cobra figure things, which, is still an incredible
that was a
figure line.
Peak for 4-inch, wasn't it, for Joe?
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
What did you work on?
Generally, that was it.
What did you work on Pursuit of Cobra? Just give us a few randoms, because I'm quite interested in what you worked on with that.
So I did some of the parts for Hit and Run.
Oh, brilliant!
Which I think maybe got released as part of the Collectors Club instead.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, but I did the portrait and I think a helmet for that.
Brilliant.
I worked on the General Hawk from the Rise of Cobra line.
Nice.
Which transitioned into Pursuit of Cobra, but I worked on that. My most favorite was that I got to do the Zombie Viper.
Oh my goodness.
And so, obviously a genetic zombie, not, the traditional sense, but that one, it's kind of fun how that one came to be, at least from my side. Obviously people had been doing zombie customs forever. And so while I was working at Hasbro as a temp, I had a little resin mold or a rubber mold of a skull for 3 3/4 or 4-inch figures. And so anytime that I was making a mold or casting of something, I would just cast an extra skull. And so I always had a bunch, of skulls on my table. And so, I would occasionally, if I needed to take a break from the project I was working on, I would just really quickly sculpt a little zombie head onto the skull,
right?
Essentially just putting some skin on it in various ways. And then I just had a little collection of zombie heads across my desk.
That's amazing.
And so one of the sculpting managers, David Proctor, he came in. Yeah. He came in and saw those. He's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, just something I do, on the side there. And he's like, "Oh, that's fun." Cut, a year later or something, I was freelance. He was like, "Hey, we're doing a zombie figure. I remember you did all those heads that were really fun. Brilliant. Do you want to do the figure?" And I was like, "Oh my God, yes, please."
Brilliant. That's awesome.
And so I really got to have fun with that one, playing with, the dynamic, poses of the hands. One of the things I was most proud of is, he had bare feet.
Yeah.
And so on the one foot, I took his like front, or his first two toes, and kind of turned them up, which I wanted it to give sort of like a feeling of discomfort.
Yeah.
And so I had fun with that, and it made it through production, which I was not sure it would. So I was proud of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's one of those ones that's gone down in like G.I. Joe lore now. It was such a really sought after figure, and he got the re-release in the 2-pack as well. So that's awesome, man. That's fantastic. Yeah. I didn't know you worked on that. That's news to me. So that's wicked.
There you go.
and a name drop for Davey P as well, or Davey Proctor.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dave.
Dave Proctor. He was really my biggest mentor. When I was coming up in the. Wow.
That's a shame. He ruined you, basically, is what you're saying.
He did. He certainly ruined me to be good is good enough.
Oh my god,
that was very much not good enough for Dave, and now it's not good enough for me.
He is probably the most. Like, he is a perfectionist, isn't he? Basically, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
But he will spend just laser focus on that until it is right. Like, I will. If I'm saying anything about Dave, it's that he is ridiculously detail oriented and crazy perfectionist. Anyway,
and, so he taught me pretty much everything, about articulation, sculpting, engineering, production, and so I owe so much to Dave, and he was incredibly talented, and so it was a great mentor, and friendship, and we became close over the years. So I'm very thankful for him.
I promise I wouldn't cry, but you might have me going then. No, Dave's a good lad. That's awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, let's move on to the classified series now. So obviously that was quite an important part of your career to date.
Yes.
Yep. Now, were you involved on that brand from its inception? Did you come onto it further into the line? I mean, what was the first thing you worked on in terms of classified series?
Yeah, I was on it from jump. Even when Lenny was working on early, concept designs of like, where do we want G.I. Joe to go? Even before sculpture was really needed. Me and him were already like, ooh, I mean, obviously I was a Joe fan, so I was like, oh, what are you doing? Where, what direction are you going?
Show me what you're doing.
What's going on? Exactly. And I mean, that's what you do, at Hasbro when you're a fan. I'd also pop into Dwight's office and be like, hey, what's going on with Marvel Legends? And whatnot. So, so I was part of that, and we would, riff and chat about stuff. And then once it was like, all right, we're now ready to, go to model, and start sculpting things.
That must have been
exciting.
Like, all right,
I'm there. I want to take that on. Because I was already working on Power Rangers at the time.
Yeah. You were busy.
So I was just like, oh, I was. But G.I. Joe was, it is an incredible brand to work on, and I loved it. And so I was just like, yes, please give that to me. And then, I mean, realistically, I also worked on another 6-inch pitch, that didn't end up going forward before classified series, and so I worked on that as well. So, I've really been on the 6-inch G.I. Joes from, before it was a thing. And so when that first Snake Eyes, what was
the deluxe, the 000 one.
Yes. Yeah. When it was looking like, okay, this is going to be a thing, we're moving forward with it, producing it. I was given the input and everything. And, me and Lenny, we collaborated on it, figure out, okay, how do we want to execute this or that, whatever.
That's cool.
Being a Hasbro sculpting manager, you don't generally get time to sculpt a full figure. I'm working with outside vendors and I'm managing all of them to make sure that they are executing, the figure sculpts in a way that, the team and the designer, and I am looking for, and so it's up to me to be the art director of the 3D development.
That makes sense.
So when I get the Snake Eyes, I call up Fred, Fred Axon, 2D sculpts.
2D sculpts on Instagram. Yeah.
2D sculpts on Instagram.
I'll ask him. Hang on, give me a sec.
And he's now part of Boss Fight Studios. I immediately called him up and I'm like, dude, we're doing 6-inch G.I. Joes. Do you want to do it? And he was like, drop everything. Yes. A little backstory on that. I met Fred when I was at Temp, way back at the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
And he was also just starting as a temp, making toys professionally and getting into sculpture. So he was a temp at Hasbro as well. And
Amazing.
so we met there, and, we immediately hit it off, toy guys,
Yeah.
into the same things. And at one
Fred's
point I was
great.
like, hey man, I've done some 6-inch GI Joe customs. Would you want to see them? He's
They're
like,
really
I
good.
also do 6-inch
Yeah.
GI Joe customs, and so we're like, oh sweet, and so we were showing each other our work, and we recognized each other from online, but we had never interacted.
Right.
So now, whatever that was, 10 plus years later, it was like, hey man, this is now our chance to do this for real, and make it what we wanted.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a very long circle, to get back to, us working together on 6-inch GI Joes, which is where our friendship sort of
That's
blossomed.
amazing. So
Yeah.
it does look like you guys had a really tight knit team as well. So that must have been quite tough having to, having that taken away effectively. But
Yes.
from what we could see, it looked like you, Lenny, Emily, Tony, you know that team that was kind of like. But
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the kind of like the last year or so,
Yep.
seemed to be really tight knit, really kind of good camaraderie and everything. Was that
Yeah.
the gist of it? And was it like an environment where you really enjoyed and bounced ideas off and all that kind of stuff?
Yes. That team was incredible to
Yeah,
work with.
yeah,
Lenny is a insane talented designer, and what he brought to the table with so much passion and care and, just excitement gets everyone excited,
right.
and people who generally aren't into GI Joe or whatever, they would be in a meeting with him, and just hear about how badass things are, that they'd be like, all right, like I want to know more, that type of thing. And so working with Lenny directly, we were a dynamic duo,
Right.
and we really would riff together, and things like a perfect example of it is the new Firefly that was shown.
Yes.
He designed that character, all the accessories, etc., and he had a remote detonator for the mines. And I was looking at it, and it just had sort of this big button wheel thing on the front, and I was like, that looks an awful lot like an RC remote. And I've played a lot of Call of Duty Black Ops in my day,
Yep.
or Modern Warfare, maybe, whatever. I
It
play a lot of Call of Duty.
There was one that came with the little drone as well, the little RC drone. Wasn't it?
Yes.
Like it was
Yep.
like
And I was
yeah.
like, oh man, can we reference that, and actually make it an RC remote, do the C4 on the RC car, which is not something that he was really familiar with. But
Right.
he was like, oh my God, that's awesome. I don't know if there's any actual like real world implications of that, but whatever. It was just super fun, and he was just like, oh my God, yeah, that would be awesome. It's, just something fun, adds a little extra
Yeah.
to the story. Lenny is, of course, very driven by story when he's doing designs, and and I am too. And so
Yeah.
anytime that we can bring in more story, and more little flavor things, the better. And so that's just one of the many examples where he would start with something, then I would add to it, and then he would add to it too, and then it would just this snowball effect of awesomeness.
That's
At least
fantastic.
from my perspective.
What in that kind of process? What were the biggest challenges for you guys when doing the classified series? I mean, were the things that like really like you kind of hit brick walls with and had to change directions with? I mean, what were the kind of things you had to deal with in that sense?
So I mean, there definitely were hurdles, to get through, particularly at the start of the line.
Yeah.
Classified series started because they were in development on the Snake Eyes movie.
Yes.
Excuse me. And so they were like, well, we haven't done anything with GI Joe for at least 5 years, and so this movie's coming out. We want to get some buzz going, and get some stuff on the shelves so that we can start building out that retail space, and to get some excitement for the movie.
Yeah.
And so that was how it started. But there was still also a lot of questions of, okay, well, GI Joe hasn't been on the shelf for several years.
Yeah.
Obviously the GI Joe fandom and fan community is quite large, but this is a very new expression going into 6-inch scale.
Yeah.
And with the brand having been shelved for so long, there was a question of like, well, are they going to show up for this?
Yeah.
And is the community big enough to support the numbers that Hasbro needs for a line to be successful?
Yeah.
And so that was really a big question mark for us, and
not so much anymore, I guess, right?
Not so much now. Yeah. So yeah, when we released the figures, particularly the 00 Snake Eyes, and it sold out in super fast.
It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Ironically, that is the only classified figure that I don't have. So I'll get one eventually.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I have pre-production samples of it and whatnot, but I don't have a final production in box, because the packaging was so beautiful on that set.
Stunning, wasn't
so
it?
I'll get it eventually. It sold out super fast, so I was like, oh well, I'll get one somewhere, and it just hasn't happened.
What's crazy is that you worked at the company at the time. Surely it should have been just a case of walking down the hallway and going yoink somewhere.
That is one of the things, with Hasbro. It is a very big company, so there's a lot of moving parts, and to be blunt, getting the development team's final,
last
product
priority
samples.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that. It just sometimes it gets missed, and there were times where I would work on, whole series of projects that I never saw the final product for, internally, and I would go out and buy them myself or, track them down one way or another.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was one. Obviously, it sold out very fast, so it didn't have a ton of units. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. A ton of units in it, and so it was just one that never made it to my collection, but I will get one.
Yeah,
here sooner or later.
I was lucky enough to be at the launch for the Toy Fair kind of preview thing they did.
Yep.
And that's where I met Lenny and the marketing team at the time. And they all seemed really nice and everything, and kind of hit it off with Lenny because you know what Lenny's like. He's just gets on with everybody. He's so friendly.
Yep.
And like that was such an interesting time as well. Like the Snake Eye, seeing those figures for the first time, like in physical form in front of me, I was like, this is crazy. This is amazing. And that Snake Eyes, man, beautiful. Such a cool design, and like a new take on him, and still retained very heavily the Snake Eyes theme. So that was a great one.
People will ask me like, oh well, what's the favorite figure you worked on? And that one always raises to the top because of how sentimentally connected to it I am. It obviously was the first 6-inch G.I. Joe we were doing, so that's important to me. But also working with Lenny, he really let me bring a lot to the table.
That's great.
And particularly on the articulation. That was something where when we started G.I. Joe, classified, I was like, okay, well, the history of G.I. Joe figures has always been the next step in what the rest of the industry was doing, in terms of articulation, in terms of playability,
detail on the sculpt and everything. Yep. Going back even to the 12-inch, figures, they were always pushing the bar, kung fu grips and, more accessories and, playability there. Obviously the 80s O-ring figures, went from, the entire industry went from 5 POA to now, these figures that have a ton of articulation and movement. And so I wanted to take that same concept into classified, and so I was like, all right, obviously we need to hit the big beats that a 6-inch figure is expected, double jointed knees, elbows, torso articulation. But I saw that there were things that it's like, oh, well, the majority of the figures would have an ab crunch or a waist rocker. And so I was like, why not?
Why can't we do both? And so I, made sure that we could fit all the internals in there and everything. And then also bringing in the drop hips.
Oh, that
That was
was
something.
genius. That was genius,
Thank you.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I really wanted to do for a couple of reasons. I try to dabble in the Japanese import figures as much as I can, and that was one of the things that they had
Yeah.
incorporated in some figures. And so I was like, oh, okay, I understand how this works. Let's see if we can bring it in on our side.
Mm.
And also doing all these things on GI Joe, where we didn't have a royalty and we didn't have a licensor.
Yeah. No
It allowed
approvals
us to
necessary. I take it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Everything was just, the internal team, as long as everyone agreed, we could do it, and so that gave us the flexibility to try new things that some of the other brands were a little more restricted on.
Mm.
And yeah, so really a lot of that was my passion and the things
Yeah.
that I really wanted to bring to the line and explore how far can we push it. And so that figure will always be near and dear to me. And I can proudly say that we did a ninja snake guy, or a ninja figure that can touch his forehead to his knee, which not many figures
Not
can
many
do,
can
and so
do
I'm pretty
that.
proud of that.
I
Yep.
remember vividly when I got that Snake Eyes in the post, the first one. I remember
Mm-hmm.
taking it to see Fred, and
Mm-hmm.
and I went, "Hey man, I got the new Snake Eyes figure." And he went, "Oh great, let me have a look." And he took it out, and he took a picture of it. It's on his Instagram still, of this almost like Spider-Man pose with the Snake Eyes. It's
Yep.
incredible. And
Yeah.
he's great at that. I can't. I'm awful at posing figures. I'm terrible. But Fred, Dave Proctor, Eric Aranya,
Yep.
those guys can pose figures in the most incredible way, and it
Yeah.
always puts me to
Yeah.
shame. Mine are just like that, and theirs are all doing all these crazy things.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It is
amazing.
one of the things, I love posing out my figures, but with my collection being as dense as it is, they're always displayed
Just
just shoulder to shoulder, you
like they're in a
and I can't really
nightclub.
do anything. But
Yeah, they're in a
yep,
busy nightclub.
exactly.
Boy, this
Yep.
nightclub's a
But
bit weird, isn't it? Yeah, I know it is.
or the best.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it does
Yeah.
look like the best nightclub ever. It looks like a nightclub in hell, but that's also pretty cool.
I mean,
Uh,
sounds great.
when you okay, so this is something I've always been interested in, and I think I've
Hmm.
asked Lenny this, I've asked Emily this, and they all have a similar kind of response with it. When it comes to kind of the fan feedback, was that something you paid attention to personally? Was it something you tried to avoid? Was it something that you ever used to act upon and tried to change things? I mean, how was that experience for you?
Yes. I mean, I was very in tune to the fan response,
Yeah,
and I mean, I am a fan, I am a collector, and so I want to know, what are their experiences with it?
yeah,
What are they gravitating towards? What are they, not enjoying so
yeah,
much?
yeah,
I am, a strong advocate for constructive criticism.
yeah,
And so, I do look for that. I pour my heart and soul into every project that I do, but I always know it can be better,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so, yeah, what are people wanting? What are they liking? That type of thing. And so I was always very closely paying attention to it. And between, me and Emily and Tony, and Lenny as well, of course.
yeah. I think Lenny
Um,
was involved. I can't remember
I think so. I think he did something on the brand.
tangentially.
Uh,
He's on the periphery, basically. Yeah,
yep. Um, but we all kind of saw the fan reactions from different places,
yeah,
and so we would all be able to be like, oh, well, I'm seeing this over here, seeing that over there and whatnot. But we certainly always paid attention to it, and one of the ways that I mean we were constantly steering the ship, for what fans are looking for and what
right.
they're what are the things that fans are talking about that's rising to the top. And so we were always adapting and whatnot. But one of the things that I specifically kept seeing that I was like, okay, this is something that we need to address was the hand wrist articulation.
Right.
And so when we first started the figures, we gave Snake Eyes what I'm calling double vertical discs.
Yeah.
And so they would be able to rotate sort of front and back, which is great for pointing swords. It's great for pistols, and it's great for most things that you're holding. But then we also did the throwing star hand and the flat hand. And so those would have horizontal articulation because that makes more sense for those poses.
Yeah.
Then when we did the Duke, I gave him a left hand vertical. Does this look like left to you?
Yes.
Okay, great.
This is my.
Well,
this is my.
I don't
left.
know if it's mirrored for you and what.
That's your left.
Yeah.
So if
sense.
I was to spin,
fair.
yeah, that's right.
Yep. Cool.
We'll just keep doing this.
Right, then, yep. Is this going to be your thumbnail now?
Yeah.
The preview.
They're being really mean to each other. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Duke had that one, and was it that one?
Yes.
That's really
and then
hard
the
to
right
do.
was side to side. It is. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, he must be left-handed. Yep. Because this is the gun holding hand.
Yeah.
But I actually did it the other way on purpose because I was experimenting, what is going to be the best, most realistic and, I think the most fun way for him to be able to hold a rifle. And, so in my experimenting, I do actually have pictures of, playing with a first shot. Okay, if the wrist, if he's holding a rifle, when the wrist is horizontally based, he can actually get the gun closer into the body. Into the body, and so it gets him looking down the sights a little bit cleaner.
Almost,
but it does it does kick the elbow out, which is technically not accurate. That is not the ideal way to shoot a rifle. And so, but I felt like, well, that makes the pose better in my mind.
Right.
Then I saw a lot of feedback of people being like, that seems weird. It seems like it should be, keeping the elbow down, and vertically articulating it.
Yeah.
And then also you get some more natural, like resting poses, and that type of thing. And so, once we started seeing that feedback, we adjusted and we made sure that all, right hands, essentially, unless the character we know is left-handed, but I don't think that really ever came up.
No.
And making sure that they always had the vertical articulation so that it would be more accurate to play and whatnot. Unfortunately, I don't think we were really able to implement it until I think Stalker was the first one.
Okay.
Just because of how timing and feedback and whatnot worked out.
Yeah, and the
but we did make the
process,
shift, and so now all the later waves they're much more vertical wrist. Yeah, there's much more of those in the line.
Much more of these in the line. Brilliant.
Yes, much more of this.
I've never really noticed that as a problem though. And I know what you're talking about because I remember this little kind of like bit of dissent that kind of creeped around about that. But I've never really, in my experience, never really had any issues posing the figures or anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it was
Different
a
strokes,
small
I guess.
thing
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, it's not a big deal, and also if you preferred it the other way and you're okay with them being left-handed, then that's also fine. But I had my very deliberate intention of why I was doing this, and then seeing the fans essentially didn't like that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, I'm certainly not infallible. That was my opinion, and it seemed like much more people either didn't have an opinion or felt the other way.
Right.
So we adapted.
That's awesome though. And speaking of, and obviously, you're not involved in the brand now. But
Correct.
A lot of your stuff is still coming out. We're still seeing a lot of the stuff that you've worked on.
Yes. Yep.
Are there any that you were really excited for us to, for the fans to see that have come out in like the last few months, like over Yojo June and SDCC? Are there any kind of outstanding ones that you're like, yeah, finally?
I mean, yes. All of them. I mean, every figure we did, I got excited about, even if it was like, honestly, even if it's a redeco, like the black and red alley viper, I had no involvement in that because it's just a redeco. So
Right.
Lenny just did the redeco, it didn't have any new tooling and it just moved on, but even that one, I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
I really loved how that looked. I loved its, general vibe and aesthetic, and so, yeah, I want to be like, oh, I want to see what people think about it, and it's sort of referencing the, I think that one was in the Pursuit of Cobra
Yeah,
line.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Which I love that version of it in the 4-inch too, and so I always want to see fans' reactions, and I get excited. More specifically, Tunnel Rat is one that I was
Ooh.
really excited
Yeah,
about. He
yeah.
has a lot of gear. That one was tricky because he comes with a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And one of the things that was a very high priority for myself on the line was making sure that they could carry pretty much everything,
Right.
at once.
Yeah.
Occasionally it'd be like, well, he can hold his rifle, but then everything else can be stowed. And so not everything necessarily is stowed, but
He can carry
everything
it.
can be
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah, yeah.
Also excluding hands, extra hair, that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I view that differently. But
Yeah.
so with the Tunnel Rat, he comes with a lot of stuff, and particularly harness and strap things that all sort of layer on top of each other.
Right.
So that one was a little tricky to make sure that everything, would lay correctly and it wouldn't be super bulky. It can be a little finicky while you're playing with it and posing it, that, the bag will fall off his shoulder or whatever, but generally everything, we wanted it to be able to pose and play with easily without it being a hassle.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm very happy with where that one netted out. Obviously, people don't have that in hand yet, but
not too long. I think mine's coming this week, by the way.
Oh, really? Wow.
How crazy is that?
Pretty quick. Yeah.
That 5-wave and the Desert Commando Snake Eyes, another cheeky reuse of that body, which is really cool.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. I'm using the Commando head with the
Deluxe
Commando Ninja body.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a mix of both. So
yeah.
Lovely
deco on that really as well
too.
Really,
yeah. It was one that I looked at originally and I was like, well, I won't need that one. But then you saw it. I saw it physically and I saw the colors and I was like, no, but it works really well. And I'll get that one too.
Has there been one that you haven't picked up other than the Snake Eyes 00? There can't be much that you've.
No.
Yeah. So
no. I mean,
you may
I've
say
that.
You may say I don't need that one, but it's gonna happen, isn't it?
It's gonna happen. Yeah. It is.
I was thinking that about the second Timber release, right? And then I was like, well, no, but it's Timber. And Timber's perfect. And to get one in white to mimic that first release in the version 2, I was like, yeah, go on then. And he gets a scarf, so he's different enough. Come on, bring it. Yeah. Perfect.
So I mean, throughout samples and picking figures up, I now have quite a collection of Timbers, including right here. I have one on my Mythic Legion shelf.
There he is.
So there's a Arctic character in Mythic Legions, and so I have paired them together because I like to play with my toys.
Amazing. That's weird. Who does that?
I know.
Right. Anyway, no, that's awesome. One I will say that took, I think, a lot of people by surprise were the mole rats.
Yes.
Is that one that you had obviously you had a huge input in that, I imagine, as well.
Yep.
I mean, that must have been an interesting one as well to be doing something so brand new. I know Vipra was technically, wasn't that a lot? Didn't that have a lot to do with you in terms of the concept there?
Yeah. So the Vipra was, internally you get these requests, from the marketing team, sales teams, whatever, that it's like, hey, we need an exclusive for this thing, or, we need a price, hit a price point for this, or whatever.
Right.
And that was one where I was like, okay, well, we're doing the Target run. We need a, Target exclusive. Lenny had already picked, of doing Flint,
nice,
Tiger Force Flint, and so it was like, all right, well, it would be great if it was a Python Patrol something, and so it was like, I don't know, what could we do, this or that? And one of the things that we've run into that a lot of people aren't really aware of is capacity issues.
Right.
Meaning, if we are using the same molds multiple times, they won't be able to, multiple times on different figures.
Right.
Like for instance, the Duke and the Flint share a lot of the same parts. If we were to release those at the same time, we'll run into capacity issues where they're not able to use the tools for both figures, to produce
efficiently.
all the units that we need.
Yeah. Right.
And so that is one of the things that we're always thinking about, and so
it must be a logistical nightmare, honestly.
Luckily we have, engineering, and we have Hong Kong partners, and we have people that are able to figure those things out. If it was up to me and Lenny, we would be screwed. But that was one where, we already had a bunch of things sort of lined up that was like, all right, well, we can't really use these, we can't use that body. And because it isn't exclusive, we don't really get a lot of tooling to put towards it. And so, that's when I was like, well, what about, a Python Patrol Ninja? To my knowledge, there weren't really any in the line, or, in the original Python Patrol series stuff. I was like, but it seems like it would be cool and it makes sense, for a jungle ninja type thing. And he was like, oh, yeah. And so he really liked that concept. And so then he jumped on it, and chose to do, a female, Python Patrol Ninja, and then he was able to connect it to the lore with Vipra and everything, and it worked out really well.
That's great.
But that is one of the examples of how well me and Lenny work together.
Right.
That he comes to it with one perspective, I come to it with another, and we just would collaborate and riff together. That it was an incredible brand to work on, an incredible team to work with.
Yeah.
And so it was great. So I miss it. I miss those guys. Obviously, we still chat all the time, but working day to day is
it's different, isn't
a little
it?
different.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Well, speaking on that, then you obviously you moved on. We've talked about that, of course. I think a lot of people were surprised by it, honestly, and upset about it. Not more than yourself, I'd imagine.
Yep.
We don't need to know how you feel about it, obviously, because it's obvious.
Sure.
But were you surprised by the public outpouring of support when the news came through? Because I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yes. That was completely unprecedented. The toy industry, and professionally, and the fan community isn't always aware of the people who are making the thing.
Yeah, true. Right.
And it wasn't until COVID that it was like, okay, we can't do conventions. We need to figure out a different way to get the news out of all the things we're coming up with. And so that was when the fan stream started, which really put the design and marketing teams in front of the products that they were making. And so I did my first fan stream on Power Rangers. It happened to have worked out that the Power Rangers design team had sort of been shifting, from one design team to another. And I was the one that was consistent on the brand. And so they were like, well, we're showing these figures that were mostly done by the previous team, but you've been on them the whole time. Do you want to talk about them? I was like, yeah, great. Would love to. Hey, I could talk about toys forever. So I did that, and that was the first one. I was like, okay, I like this. And it was one of the things that I felt strongly that coming from sculpture, I bring a slightly different perspective to the figures than design does. And so then, particularly once Emily was on G.I. Joe, I worked with her on Power Rangers as well, and so then it was like, hey, I want to be doing more of this. I think that it's valuable for the fans to get, more information. Also, I'm a huge fan of this stuff. And so I want to talk about the thing I'm passionate for. Yeah. And, Emily was great to work with. And so she was just like, hell
She's
yeah,
awesome.
She obviously is very aware of my passion, and all of the care and love that I put in these things. So she wanted me to be able to be part of that. And so leading into the layoffs, the company has been in a hard place, and it has been for a little while. And so, big, corporate conglomerate. And so layoffs happen.
Yeah.
I had been at Hasbro for 10 years full time. My wife has been there for 15 years. And so, we've seen rounds of layoffs come and go, and it hurts and it sucks every time, when you're in the company. But it is something it's part of that world, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
And so, when my number got called, you're not really given a reason why it was me instead of them or whatever, and it's not really important at the end of the day. But so when I was let go, I was pretty much one of the first times that someone with a public face to the fan community was let go in that way.
Yeah.
And, so there were people that were like, whoa, what's up? Why is this happening? And, it was a terrible situation. About 1,000 people were let go globally from Hasbro, which is big, that's a lot.
It was a huge amount. Yeah.
Yeah, and I am so grateful to the Joe community and, the toy community at large, for getting as much support as I did, working at Hasbro and working on G.I. Joe and working with that team, at that time was hands down the best my career had ever been. And it was the dream job for me. And so losing that was really hard. And having the support of the community, having people reach out to me, just to say, hey, I've been laid off too, and it sucks. And, but we know you're going to land on your feet, love what you brought to the brand, blah, blah, and it really helped me in a time when I needed it. It was tough, and I do have a bit of guilt, I guess, because I've seen so many incredibly talented people and passionate people that, unfortunately get laid off and it's completely invisible, and they don't get that support, but I'm grateful, for the community that reached out to me, and I've been to a couple conventions since then, and people will come up to me and, hey, I recognize you from the live streams and, really appreciate the things that I was bringing to the brand. It meant a lot. And now there's a new sculptor that's in that position, managing for the brand, and I know him. I worked with him closely. I don't know how public he wants to be, so I won't say his name, but
name and shame. I'm just kidding.
No, but he's incredibly talented. He's a great guy. I'm pleased that the brand will be in his hands, and know that he's going to do a great job with it. And obviously Lenny, Tony, and Emily still on the brand, and that is always going to be the heart, of the brand. And so, now, a little bittersweet that I get to be surprised, by what they've got going next, and I get to see things without, some of the baggage of behind the scenes. One of the things that being, a designer and someone who works on the brand is you have the ambition of what you want everything to be, and then by the time it comes out and is released, sometimes you can only see well, I wanted it to be this other thing, or, oh, I couldn't include this accessory that I think would have been fun, or, oh, we did a whole figure that was canceled. And so,
sure.
It'll be fun.
We're just flashing up the images. Nice. We're just flashing up the images of all those canceled figures that Cory couldn't.
Yep. So it'll be nice.
Dude, that is, you mentioned a little second ago there, you mentioned kind of landing on your feet. Someone said that you'll be fine, you'll land on your feet. And I think you probably had about 1 million offers when you left, didn't you? You weren't hard up for work by the looks of it, because straight away you've fallen into more kind of toy industry kind of work. Yes.
One of the things that I was very blessed with, being able to be on the live stream, have the ability to represent, my work and, the things that I was working on. When I was let go, there were, several people that reached out that was like, hey, if you're, not with Hasbro anymore, and you're open to freelance work,
it was mainly me messaging you though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
On behalf of about 16 different.
Figure out how to block your number, but no, there were a couple of different companies, and even just some individual, small independent things that were like, maybe full time, maybe freelance work, but want to work with you in some way. And at first I was like, well,
I just want to relax for a minute.
Yeah. I want to take some time to, grieve, essentially the loss of the Hasbro position. But also just take some time to figure out, well, what do I want to do next? Do I want to just jump to another company, or, do I want to do freelance? Do I even want to do toys anymore? That was an easy answer. Yes,
of course.
But I want to take some time for myself.
Yeah.
And then it was Ben Conway of Skeletron that reached out, and he was very understanding when I was like, well, I need time, whatever. But obviously I was aware of what they were doing with the Robo Skull and the Kickstarters, and I saw it, while I was at Hasbro, and I was like, oh my God, that thing's awesome.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I need the time to figure it out, but if you want to just chat about what you're doing, I can do that, just because I love talking toys.
Yeah.
And he immediately was like, okay, that's it. That's my in.
Yeah.
And, he was constantly like, hey, we're looking at this thing or whatever, and so then that just quickly became us talking about the product, talking about, future things that they want to do. And, then it was like, well, we have the 6-inch figure we're currently developing. And at the time, the sculpt was like, probably 90% done. Aesthetically, it looked great. But they were like, we really want to, take the learnings that I had from being at Hasbro and doing classified series and incorporate it into this figure and have it be as close to classified series as, we can.
Yeah.
And ideally better,
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, that's great. That's obviously exactly what I did, or what I do,
Yeah.
And so they were able to send me the sculpt, and I went through and looked at things, and I was like, well, you could do this, you could push it here, you could change this thing.
Awesome.
And there was a lot of times where I was like, well, so I see what you're doing here, but we could tweak it in this other way, or we can include this other thing that could bring value, but it may cost a little bit more, or it might be a little more tooling.
Ben
or whatever.
was like, whatever, man.
I know, they're so passionate about it that every time they were just like, well, is it going to make the figure better? And I'm like, well, yeah, if you can afford it. And they're like, well, then that's what we're going to do. And I was like, wait a second, but what about the pennies?
I love Ben. I love Ben. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, and yep. And now, not to put down what you do at Hasbro, because
of course,
you need to critique down to the pennies, sometimes the fraction of pennies, because they're making huge units, and so each thing that you do and add will greatly affect how much profitability and how much viability it is for the company to make that. But then going to this world where it was just whatever we want to do to make this the best thing possible. It was this breath of fresh air of just like, oh, let me pour my passion and my knowledge into this, and let's, really make this the best 6-inch figure you can get, for, that reasonable price point.
That's Ben. That's Ben in a nutshell as well, though, isn't it? That's Ben in a nutshell too. Like he's super generous and super kind and super helpful, and he'll and then that whole thing with the cost. It was most of our conversations when we were developing the whole idea. I was on the phone with him for about 8 hours one day, and we were just talking about all these things, and everything's just like, yeah, but it'll be cooler though if we do this, and I'm like, okay.
Exactly.
It's just that's how the conversations go with Ben. He's amazing like that.
Have you had the Skeletron guys on the show yet?
Oh well, yeah, loads. We did the whole kind of promotional campaign. We did live shows where we had both Mark and Ben on and everything. Yeah, we've done that to death. We'll be getting them on as soon as the next stuff comes out though as well. So yeah, awesome. You'll be on that as well then, won't you, Cory?
Maybe I will. We'll see.
We'll get a whole what what they call, what's it called? Is it that TV show with all the little celebrity squares we'll have going on?
Yeah,
Just
that would be fun. Um, yeah, so working with Skeletron and Mark and Ben, right now it's just through freelance contract
yeah,
work. But I told him, I'm like, look, I love what you're doing. I want to be as involved as possible.
yeah,
But I don't want to uh, uh, I don't want to commit yet.
sure,
I want to
sure,
play the field a little. One of the things that I immediately thought of, when I was let go, was like, well, this sucks, but
mm,
right now is this crazy golden age of action figures,
yeah,
particularly in the independent market.
absolutely,
And so before leaving Hasbro, I saw what Skeletron was doing. I saw what Boss Fight was doing, the
yeah,
Horseman, Savage Crucible,
yeah,
and all these other companies that I was like, ooh, I want to play with them.
yeah,
I want
yeah.
to play with their toys. And I want to get in there and see, is there something that I can work on with them to be, have a small part of that. And so Skeletron was the first one, and then fell in with Boss Fight after that. Um, so I was just at PowerCon,
That was
and I did
amazing.
Joe
Yeah,
Fest earlier, and so I'm doing all the networking things so that I can, play with all these companies, so that, selfishly, so that I can,
yeah,
be part of that, and make cool stuff. But also, I do have a lot of expertise, in manufacturing, articulation,
yeah, yeah.
and just general, action figure development that, a lot of the independent companies don't necessarily have without having been at Hasbro
Yeah,
for
yeah, totally.
10 years. So,
Yeah,
I want to be able to lend my expertise to them because I want their product to be good because I want it.
exactly. Yeah, you're making it for yourself, basically, aren't you? At the end of
Yes,
that's the full circle situation.
exactly.
And one last thing I want to mention is that it was kind of revealed over PowerCon that you're doing the
Yes.
6-inch Court of the Dead stuff for Boss Fight Studio.
Yeah. So that's super exciting. I am a little eccentric. um,
Amazing.
and yeah, so when Sideshow started doing the Court of the Dead statues, I
Yeah,
was
they're insane,
immediately
aren't they?
smitten.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are
It was
gorgeous,
the one.
and
It was the mermaid one where you have the water around her waist, like halfway up
yep,
the. And I'm just like, that's magical. What they've
yeah,
done there. I've never seen that in statues before.
yeah. They really elevated the bar,
Mm,
and because it was their owned and
IP.
operated brand,
Yeah.
they were able to even do to work on designs that will work best for the premium format statues that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so each one is just this new level of incredible.
Yeah.
And so I've been obsessed with them, but I need to be able to draw a line somewhere,
Yeah.
in collecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so generally, I'm like, okay, 6-inch, articulated action figures is the main thing I collect. I do venture out of that a lot,
Occasionally.
but when it comes to
All the
statues,
time.
they're obviously on the high end of cost, and space. And so I hadn't gotten any. Um, and so then when Boss Fight started to do the 4-inch figures,
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, that's great. That's really exciting. And so, I got the wave one of those.
You Gethsemane and
Um,
Kia.
yes. Yeah. And they're beautiful, and they're great figures. And then when they revealed wave two a couple months ago, I was like, okay, now we're getting into the meat of Court of the Dead. I was
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
excited about it, but my heart lies in 6-inch. And so in January, I was getting lunch with Fred. We were hanging out. I had picked up some toys for him as we were doing a toy exchange, as you do.
Yeah.
um, and Fred is with Boss Fight Studios. I assume most people know, but and I was chatting with him, and I was just like, dude, these 4-inch Court of the Dead figures you're doing are incredible. I'm like, but 6 inch is where it's at, like 6 inch figures, that is where the fan base is,
Mm.
the majority of it, and there's so much more you can do at 6 inch, and obviously very selfishly, that was what I wanted to collect.
Yeah.
And, and at the time he was just like, yeah, I know, I would think that was, I think that would be great, but, we'll see. Probably 3 weeks later, I get let go.
Oh God.
And Fred was, and Fred pretty much immediately, calls me up or texts, I don't know. And it's just like, hey, this sucks. I'm sorry. But you remember that conversation we were having a couple weeks ago? So we are actively getting the license for 6 inch, from Sideshow, and we're going to move forward with it.
Wow.
And we're going to have Death in wave 1. Do you want to be the sculptor on it?
Oh my goodness.
I was just like, oh my God. Like, in my lowest of lows, he gives me this holy grail project for me that was just like, oh, this is so perfect. It's the exact type of beautiful, grotesque thing that I like, and they're doing it at 6 inch, the scale that I like, and fully articulated. And, it was just like, oh my God, dude, yes, I would love to do that.
Brilliant.
So I was able to get that sculpt, done. There's still a couple things I'm finishing on it, but we were able to have a 3D print at PowerCon, and so wave 1 is going to be Death and Kier, and so they essentially took the accessories and sculpt and such, scaled it up from the 4 inch, and then added the updated articulation that is standard for 6 inch, so they'll both have butterfly joints, multiple points of articulation in the torso.
Will their head be able to touch their knee,
knees.
though? Is that?
Well, yes. Yeah.
Let's just say yeah.
If I have anything to say about it, yes.
Snap. I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. They do have some pretty complex designs, so I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
But they
look incredible.
are looking gorgeous.
Yeah, phenomenal stuff.
And so I'm excited to get those out and get them in people's hands. Granted, in like a year from now.
Yeah.
But they're going to be beautiful. And also one of the things is Boss Fight. They're a small company, and so they're always gauging, fan interaction and fan interest. And so that's a big part of why they revealed the Court of the Dead 6 inch figure so early, is because they want to make more, so they want to make sure that the audience is there, and so I was, at PowerCon, always encouraging people like, hey, take a picture, tag it, put it online. If you want this to happen, and you want a whole line of it, the more excitement around it, the better. And, I definitely think people are excited for them. So
absolutely.
I love that line to keep going, because the designs of all the Core of the Dead characters are incredible.
It's next level. And the funny thing is, it's one of those things that, had you not told me you were into, I would assume you were into it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely,
it's just
obviously.
it's just phenomenal stuff. And obviously the PowerCon stuff they showed off, which I actually packed for you, but the PowerCon the PowerCon stuff that was shown off, I mean, absolutely phenomenal looking. And it's just so nice that you're going from, like you said, that kind of ultimate low, that real low point, immediately into what is effectively like, at least, hey, here's another dream for you to get involved with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And that was part of it. I had the dream job.
Yeah.
That up to that point, and really it was that like 2 years of being on G.I. Joe, and being on Power Rangers, but particularly right at the tail end, of being able to do everything we were on G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
That was the best my career had ever been. That was the dream job. That was exactly where I wanted to be.
Right.
And then when losing that, it was like, oh, okay, well, now I need to figure out what is my new
what's the next dream?
Job?
Yeah,
what's the next dream? And it was tough, obviously, but right now I think it is just getting out there, playing with these other independent companies,
Yeah.
and some of the bigger companies too. I will be continuing to work with Hasbro, or at
Okay.
least that is the goal. There's a rule, I guess, where after a layoff or after someone leaves Hasbro of their own volition or otherwise, um, you can't do Hasbro freelance work for 6 months,
Right.
which is up at the end of the month for me.
Oh,
And so I
interesting.
have already been in talks with the new sculpting manager for G.I. Joe, and I've been in talks with Lenny, and so if all goes according to plan, I will still be working on some of those figures just in a different capacity that I was
Yeah.
before.
That's good news, because I feel like
Yes.
not just for yourself, but for the fandom who've been enjoying
Oh,
this classified series, and and I'm not going to say solely because of you, but you have
no,
a
of course
huge
not.
part to play in that enjoyment. Why everyone loved this product. So I think
Yep.
one of the things, we mentioned that thing about the outpouring of kind of support and everything because you were public
Hmm.
facing. It was also one
Yeah.
of those things where everyone kind of knew what you were about, knew the quality that you brought to what the brand. Same with Lenny. They know his design chops and they know what he brings to it.
Yep.
To lose any one of you in that capacity was going to be rough. But
Right.
I just know that, like, you're looking at it from the outside in, going kind of like, well, where do we go from now? Like, someone else has got to take that position up, and they've got to knock it out the park. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's
Right.
like you go from like almost like a known variable to an unknown variable, and I think that's what kind of concerned a lot of people. They were all like, well, what's it going to be like now without Cory? And yeah,
Right.
does that so it's nice to know that you might be, getting back into that brand
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. I will have, I'll have my hands on it in some way, but obviously the new sculpting manager on it, he's incredibly talented. I know he's going to keep the ball rolling,
Yeah,
and I've
he
already talked to
he
Lenny
better
about how they're working together. Oh, he will. It'll be good.
he better.
And they're all, already getting along, and coming up with some cool stuff, and so, um, I know that he's going to continue to have the brand be incredible, and he's going to bring things to it that I didn't, and there's going to be things that I brought to it that he won't,
Yeah,
and that's totally fine, and it'll
true.
just be, yeah, the heart of the brand is still going to be there for sure. And like I say, I'll still get to play here and there.
Yeah,
Actually, I have talked to Lenny about one of the upcoming figures that I would like to work on. And
nice.
so if all goes well, I can hopefully in, like, I don't know, I guess probably 8 months when it's
Yeah.
revealed, I'll be able to be like, that was it. That was my first figure
I
as
was.
a
Oh, I thought you.
freelancer
I thought you were
where
going
I
to just
got to
tell us
sculpt
now.
it.
I thought you were just going to tell us now who it is, and then
Oh,
we'll flash
I
the image
didn't.
up.
Oh, well, it's oh, yeah, okay.
Forgotten.
Forgot.
That's
Yep.
how you do it. That's how you avoid that annoying question from me. Is just say, "I forgot, mate. Sorry." Dude,
Yep.
that is brilliant though. Like I said, yes, it's bittersweet, but I'm so happy that you're going to still be on the brand in some capacity.
Yes.
But also,
Yeah. Me
mate,
too.
everything else that you're involved in, obviously, like the Skeletron thing, boss fight. I'm just so
Hmm.
excited for what you're going to bring to those companies as well. So it's great to kind of have you back a little bit. Like it might.
Yeah.
Does it feel like you're back in the game a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yes. One of the things is being able to do things like this more.
Yeah,
Hasbro being a big company, there's a lot of
yeah. There's red tape,
kind
isn't
of,
there?
yeah, red tape and hoops that you have to jump through to make things like this happen. But now as a vendor and whatnot, as long as I don't say the wrong things, and get blacklisted. Oh, I hope not. But now it's easier to be able to get out there in the public and talk about the things that I'm passionate about and whatnot.
Yeah,
And also I'm trying to build my brand
yeah,
essentially, being a freelance sculptor, consultant, expert, type of thing, so that when companies are like, hey, we're doing this new thing, they'll be like, oh, well, we need to contact Cory Creations. Little plug for myself.
nice.
Just get his eyes on it, and
Yeah.
to get his input, and that would be the ideal, and so far it's seeming to work out pretty well. At
Awesome.
PowerCon, I got to talk to a bunch of independent companies, and get my card out there and my info. So hopefully, those contacts will blossom into, a lot of cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you
This was
so
great.
much, dude. It's been so much fun. I love chatting with
Yeah.
you anyway. Like it's always great. We'll have to have you on more often now, and we'll just you
I
up
hope
for
so.
that?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right.
So what we'll do about 2 bursts a day. So you good with that?
I mean, I think it should be 4, but I guess.
Okay, fine. We'll do more. No, mate, we'll have you back on, no doubt. Well, what we should do is we should get you on like a monthly episode, and we'll talk through some like little, because we do these little things where we do like our favorite we concept little ideas together of what we'd like to see in like the classified series, for example, which you may or may not be able to do because you might give out
I'm not sure.
ideas that you're not allowed to.
Yep.
We'll get you on some way, shape, or form, because there's other things we want to talk about. We want to go into more detail with the design aspect of the figures too. I think that's something I think both of us would enjoy talking about. So
Yeah. I mean, over the hour and a half we've been chatting, we really just touched the surface of everything that goes into, making a figure and, coming up with the design concept and, the whole process, and it's one of the things that I love talking about. I'm passionate about figures, but I'm particularly passionate about how they're produced, how they're manufactured, and the mass production of that. And it's one of the things that I really became an expert at, and love talking about, love teaching people, about articulation and all those things. So,
yeah, we'll do a part 2. We'll just do a part 2 and get stuck into a bunch of figures.
Great.
It might be cool actually, obviously with the most recent wave that's out, maybe we could go through that and talk through that a little bit and go back through the years. We could just do a Cory design breakdown thing, couldn't we?
I love it.
That sounds great. Okay, cool. You're getting you back on then. That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute
Thank you
pleasure.
for having me.
Right then, that's it for this episode of the Full Force Redacted. Thank you to my wonderful guest, Cory Cantelupe. Yeah, see you next time. See you next time. And as always, after 3, you know what to do, right? You have to shout Full Force.
I do.
That? Oh, you remember?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Full Force. Brilliant stuff.
Access granted.
Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.
Access granted.